Yeah, hello and welcome to our webinar today, Gender Responsive Energy Transition and Workforce Empowerment in the Western Balkans. My name is Robert Heine. I'm Managing Director and founder of Energypedia, and I will facilitate this webinar today. As there are already a lot of people are coming in right now, we will just wait for some more minutes, like 1-2 minutes, to start the webinar. So okay, so I think we should start on time because we have also quite nice agenda. So for today, we have after this welcome introduction I'm doing right now, we have 3 inputs: labor market effective analysis, energy transition and jobs in the Western Balkans, followed by policy solutions for coal mine regions in the Western Balkans under the Just Transition Framework. And last but not least, gender disparities during the energy transition and workable systematic solutions for the Western Balkans region or EU. After the 3 inputs, there will be a panel discussion in a question-answer session. So you can also ask questions. You can ask questions in the chat or in this question-answer tool. And then if everything runs smoothly, around 3:30, we will close this webinar. I'm just checking the number of participants. It's still increasing, so welcome everybody to this webinar. For you, as some housekeeping, you are all muted by default. This is like the webinar tool of Microsoft Teams. It's not a normal meeting tool, so you're all muted. Later on, if for some reason you need to say something, we can, of course, unmute you. But we would prefer at the beginning to organize also the question and answers that you put it in the chat. My colleague Lisa will also deal with the chat, and she will also then share links in the chat from time to time. And yeah, as I said, at the end, there will be this panel discussion. So at the end, we will answer hopefully all of your questions, which were in the chat or in these question and answer sessions. I think Lisa's also handling people for some reason now jumping directly into this call without registration before, because then we have to allow them. Okay, then not to lose some more time, now I will give the floor to Nicolas Heger, head of this project, which is the host of this webinar today, Green Agenda, Decarbonization of the Electricity sector in the Western Balkans. So Nicolas, the floor is yours for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Robert. Dear guests, dear attendees of today's webinar, dear representatives of civil society and educational organization, technical assistance project, and development banks also, like as I see, active in the Western Balkans. Let me welcome to this dedicated session on gender responsive approaches in the energy transition. That is certainly a topic that cannot be highlighted enough. I'm pleased to welcome also a large audience and looking forward to a discussion with dedicated expert inputs by reputed colleagues, and also highlighting the cooperation with the Energy Community Secretariat that is gratefully picking up this topic of equality and a gender responsive energy transition in the so-called Energy Community region as well. Let me give you a small insight about the project as such and the idea why we came to the conclusion that the human dimension of the energy transition should be systematically incorporated in our work. So In general, Germany's envelope to supporting the green agenda of the Western Balkans, launched by the Sofia Declaration in 2020, is to provide technical assistance, but also macro financial assistance for major infrastructural projects, for example, power lines, hydro station, large wind or solar parks. On the other hand, the technical assistance here done by the decarbonization of the electricity sector project is looking into the renewables transition in a holistic way, foremost looking at the human dimension of this massive challenge. Let me make 2 points in this. First of all, what about the self-perception of the sector in the Western Balkans? Just to give you some number, around 70% of the power sector staff in Western Balkan is male. There are various explanatory variables for this situation, but I'm not in the position now to judge those root causes. But with my experience now for several years in the sector, yet let me tell you the following. There's a large consensus in the sector that massive imbalance in the staff structure in large energy corporation like grid operators or power utilities is very negative and has to be addressed. The new energy sector will be more diverse and multi-professional, thus providing tremendous new opportunities for people of any background and profession to join this growing sector. And I can proudly assure that our partners acknowledge this opportunity and they are ready to join this staff and human resources transformation. The second point I would like to make is the urgency and the impact of the matter of gender inequalities in the sector. Within the project of GIZ, we done regional analysis to explore employment impacts of, for example, phasing out fossil fuels, which means the coal and extractive industry sector, by basically estimating job losses and weigh them against job creation opportunities, most significantly now in the renewable sector. And also we identified skill and needs gaps and evaluated those towards existing and future education and training system. In the end, we will conclude with a roadmap to address, let's say, the new labor market in renewables, but also social implications, negative social implications that come by the energy transition. Last but not least, let me give me also some numbers about those imbalances that I mentioned. So if you take into account the renewable targets as defined by the national energy and climate plans and other strategic energy documents, approximately 40,000 direct jobs could be created as of now, within half of them only based in the solar sector. We believe that these findings should motivate Western Balkan governments alike, but also international development partners and civil society organizations, first of all, to advocate for this observation that many times more job will be created than lost. And second of all, also to encourage the private sector to endorse and work out on more intersectoral cooperation, on more diverse and multi-professional employment structures, and in the end develop framework, incentive system, career opportunities that fully use the potential of the renewable energy transition after the principle to leave no one behind and fully exploiting opportunities for more gender equality. And by having said this, warm welcome again from the side of GIZ, and I hand over again to the moderator.
Yeah, thank you very much for these opening remarks. We will now continue with the Mentimeter polls. This is also to get to know you. So please scan the QR code on the right-hand side or directly go to Menti. I will do so as well and enter the code. So I will just give you these minutes to do so. And then I will also switch to my browser. Okay, so most of you work for public institutions, followed by NGOs, followed by private company, followed by educational, university, some consultant, self-employment, and yeah, the second biggest share is others. Okay, thank you for getting this insight to our participants. Now we can switch to the next question. So now the next one is I'm joining in from. Now you can answer the second question. So yeah, not big surprise that most of you are from Western Balkans, but also warm welcome to other European countries, to Africa and America. Nobody from Asia so far. So if you're from Asia, please vote for your continent. Okay, but okay, not surprising. Most of us now participating in this call are from the Western Balkans. Okay, thank you very much. So I will go back to my presentation. And we will start with the first input from Anna Maria Boromisa. Since 1996, she's head of the Department for International Economic Political Relations at the Institute of Development and International Relations in Zagreb. Focus is on energy policy, climate change, socioeconomic impacts, and she has also served as a commissioner in the Croatian Energy Regulatory Council and is member of the IRMO Management Board and chaired the IRMO Scientific Council. So now I'm asking you, Anna Maria, to share your screen and your presentation. And the timing is quite good. So if you want, you can start now. I will stop my presentation. You can now click on this share button to share your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you see my screen now?
No, I don't see it.
So I thought I shared it, but it's not working probably.
Okay. Otherwise, I have your presentation. So if this is not working, I can also share your presentation. But then, of course, you have to tell me when I have to switch to a new slide.
Okay, I will try once again.
Yeah, you have to click on share and then choose the right screen. Yes, now it's coming. Yes.
So yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for introduction and thank you everybody for joining it. So as Nicholas already said, we were doing the research on labor market effect analysis of decarbonization of electricity sector in the Western Balkans. And I think the full study was shared with the announcement of this presentation. So I will briefly go through the results. And our key research questions were how many jobs will be lost in the energy sector due to the phasing out of fossil fuels, and how many jobs will be created in the renewable energy sector. Which skills are preconditions for missing in the energy labor workforce for achieving the decarbonization targets in the energy sector. So, for instance, the need for construction workers, digitalization, engineers, designers, spatial planners, whatsoever. And what are the key challenges and opportunities for to supply energy sector professionals with the energy demand in the Western Balkans region and in energy, renewable energy and energy efficiency sectors. So as you can see, there were no gender-based questions. However, our results show that more inclusion of women is necessary and that this current gender imbalance is not sustainable if we would like to have climate neutral or at least coherent with the existing policy goals, and if they are increased in line with the Paris Agreement, then obviously more jobs in the renewable sector will be created and gradually phase out in the current carbon-based sectors. So we had several step methodology, including the identification of current state and estimating the potential number of jobs. So our background was the current electricity mix, in which in Western Balkans dominated are hydro, especially in Albania, and coal in the most of the other countries. What are the commitments until 2030? So basically in line with the Energy Community Treaty and Sofia Declaration, as already mentioned in introductory statement by Nicholas. Current challenges in terms of age of infrastructure and the need for investment already for the infrastructure which is basically obsolete, and considering the decommissioning plans. So this is the issue which makes the analysis more complicated, because we estimated the number of jobs created until 2030 in line of national energy strategies or drafts and national energy and climate plans. And the commissioning plans provide more distanced decarbonization than 2030. So when we try to balance those jobs created and jobs lost, the timeline is not coherent. So this is one of the issues that needs to be carefully balanced in the transition period, and that is one of the essential issues for the just transition. So we estimated we took the data for the current coal-related jobs and renewable jobs, and we used international data to make sure that comparison holds. So if there are mistakes, that are basically the same methodology. And we, in our estimates for the job creation potential, we used employment factors and capacity data. So basically, what you can see with the total jobs and the coal and coal power mining and coal power plants create currently much significant share jobs than renewable energy. The only example is already mentioned, Albania, basically only relying on hydro potential. And in all other countries, the number of workers in coal mining and coal power compared to the renewable jobs is between 11.5 times higher to 85 times higher in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's the last line of this slide. And for the total region, it's 3 times more jobs in coal mining and coal power plants than in the renewable sector. However, I cannot move to the next slide. So, total 41,500 jobs are in coal-related sectors. And if we talk about decarbonization of electricity sector, that means basically that those 41,000 jobs should be transformed or phased out, or those workers should retire or will be retrained for the jobs in some other sectors, maybe in renewables, maybe something else. While this number is high, it's roughly between 0.4 and 1.5% of the workforce affected. So this is the size of the decarbonization if we look only from the perspective of the potential job losses. On the other side, we are looking at the potential for job creation within the renewable sector. And we used 3 approaches to check the coherence of data. So we used regional multipliers, and as the data at the adequate aggregate level are not available for Western Balkans, we used EU multipliers and calculated employment factors by phases. So installation, manufacturing, and operation and maintenance, and estimated direct and indirect job creation. And the results show that there is significant potential for job creation. And as you can see from this graph, the biggest potential is in solar sector, and it's related to the planned capacity of the solar power in national energy and climate plans, and that the solar multiplier for job creation in solar is the highest. So you can see here that we calculated with 3.5 jobs per megawatt in PV at scale, and at hydro it's just 0.5. So this explains partially this development. And the experience from the world and the transition in the countries, both EU and the rest of the world, show that this gender imbalance in traditional energy sector decreases with decarbonization and decentralization and more renewables. So this is also one of the important issues. Our estimates of job creation were quite conservative. So we calculated that basically there will be no job creation in production phase, so that all the equipment will be imported. It's a very hard assumption, of course, but we wanted to check the level of the job creation, total job creation until 2030, and potential job loss in total. So whatever the time frame for decarbonization and phasing out is planned. So if we compare those numbers, we see that there is a potential for job creation, and there's more jobs to be created than those who will be lost. However, this also creates a problem because there are no adequate workforce at the labor market in the countries of the Western Balkans. And the transition from the coal sector to the renewables without additional training or some support mechanism might be challenging. So those issues should be addressed with adequate policies. And the other issue which is relevant for countries of Western Balkans relates to depopulation and brain drain. So if we look at the cohort of the population who might fill those necessary jobs, we see that those are in sectors which are already affected with brain drain and depopulation. So there are lots of new jobs to be created in the construction sector, but also a number of necessary experts in the engineering, design, and different skills and values. So to address those challenges, it is necessary to carefully phase out the existing jobs and balance the creation and transition of the energy system with the phasing out of the existing power plants and other related jobs. So to address the barriers which are currently identified for decarbonization of the power sector in the Western Balkans, which related to technical, financial, social, and skills-related and policy barriers. So in this issue, the skill gaps and lack of awareness are some social elements that are necessary to successfully make transition happen. The other technical and financial issues are very well known, and they do not need some specific public awareness campaign because they are known and relevant. And there are some issues on the labor market which make this transition also challenging. So we know that there is a lower employment rate and participation rate of women. And there are some problems with youth and unemployment, so that there is a disbalance between the needs of the labor market, the potential of the decarbonization, educational system, and current policy and legal framework. So harmonization of all those issues is necessary to enable transition and to make it fair. So those, of course, vary across the countries and depend on the available labor force and potential for reskilling or upskilling available people. And so adequate conditions have to be created to enable renewable sector to become to replace the currently dominated coal-based electricity mix. So this requires addressing those different barriers, and from identification of those barriers, we identified a number of recommendations which range from the very general, so from formal adoption of the climate neutrality goals and formal adoption of national energy and climate plans, and identifying and scheduling phasing out of fossil thermal power plants, to anticipate skill needs in the public sector, which enable competence reinforcement, so to enable more quality policy making, and which requires, of course, regulatory framework, improved business environment, financial instrument, and the whole region is characterized by high participation of the informal labor market. So formalization of this participation could be beneficial for fair and speedy transition. And general awareness of necessity to decarbonize power sector is one of the issues which needs to be addressed. In those sections, we didn't go into the details, so it would be interesting to see how is the public opinion in the individual Western Balkans country relating to those. But generally, small countries and those who are not very developed, public does not perceive their obligation or responsibility for decarbonization, as their contribution to the global emissions is relatively small. However, it is still necessary to achieve global climate goals and to be able to adapt and build resilience to the climate change. So having said that, it is obvious that some of the key issues for decarbonizations are people, and the challenges of demographic change in the Western Balkans and skill gaps is something that has to be addressed. So there are a specific set of recommendations identified in our study dealing with the skill gaps, and they relate from identification of skill gaps, creation of permanent working groups, so fora for communication between different stakeholders, from those involved in the energy sector to the public sector to developers, so they can identify the skills need plans and try to balance between the needs and current capacities. To develop and create vocational education standard, improve adult education system, and balance different types of education, not only the formal education, but training on the jobs and between jobs, and to enable skipping those different transitions. If we would like to highlight another gender perspective, so if we talk about phasing out current carbon-based job, this is also a significant gender issue, because with this process, male working force will be affected the most. And the experience from Croatia shows that the male working force, when they lose their jobs and when they are older than 50, they are quite difficult to find another job or to adapt to the changes. So this concrete plan for phasing out of individual power plants and programs for specific workers should be developed to balance gradual phasing out, retirement, and the need for finding some additional jobs. So those are the basic findings of our study, and I'm looking forward to discussions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anna Maria. I will also share now, we will also share it in the chat. There will be a documentation page of this webinar today on Energypedia. The link you will find in the chat. Here we will also afterwards make a documentation of this webinar, and this is also part of the Western Balkan Power Sector Knowledge Hub. It's also public available on Energypedia. We will also share these links. Okay, so now we move on in this webinar. And there was one question in the question and answer panel. Also, Anna Maria, if you can see this, you can maybe also already start to answer it. We will go through it after the 3 presentations, but we can also, in between, we can also answer it written with a comment on this question. Okay, now the second input from Fiona Imami from CoPlan. Is the policy solutions for coal mine regions in the Western Balkans under the Just Transition Framework. Fiona is an expert in regional development and planning, specialized in territorial governance and strategic programming, has a PhD, doctoral degree in the International Architect and Urban Planning, at the coordinator of the Green Force Horizon Europe project. And I would say now I give the floor to you, and please share your screen and start your presentation. And we're good in time, so we have also like 15 minutes for your presentation. And yeah, the floor is yours. Yeah, sharing seems to work. We can see your your slides. Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, the whole team, for giving me the opportunity to be part of such interesting and much necessary discussion, I must say. And I was already keeping notes myself on the very nice presentation and also the key findings that you guys have produced so far in the project. So can you see the slides moving? Okay, now I think it's working. Yes. Okay, great. So I wanted to start my presentation with this ongoing discussion on the green transition matter, especially for the Western Balkan, which as a transition itself, it poses great challenges for the region, starting above all the policy level. And as we're here, especially discussing the need to shift from these merely commitments or agreements that the governments have taken in the Western Balkan toward the more, let's say, significant and change-making efforts, which require above all the stakeholder involvement in each of the cases of the process. Well, being an expert and coordinator for the Horizon Green Force project, I did base my presentation today in some of the findings and continuous work we've been engaged to in this frame. And really the motivation for trying to design better policies really comes from what's happening in the region and in those territories that the previous presenter also mentioned. And those regions are especially the coal mine regions in all of the Balkans and the Western Balkans. So one of our case studies on research was actually assessing the just green transition cons and pros in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And you'd be shocked in the first time that you see the enormous share that the coal-intensive industries share, both in terms of employment, but also the extensive use. And it's in front of this reality that there comes the urgency for transition, for coming up with targets, and for regional commitments. The first one, the urgency being that the region is highly vulnerable to climate changes with increasing risk of extreme weather events, water scarcity, biodiversity, etc., which means that embracing these new green practices is crucial for mitigating the environmental threats. On the other hand, we saw the opportunity, and you guys showed best how much new opportunities could drive or could be driven about the green transition in terms of economic growth by fostering green industries, creating the new jobs and attracting investments. But on the other hand, when it comes to commitments, aligning with EU environmental standards and policies remains as well crucial for successful integration for the Western Balkan countries into the European family. So this aspiration of countries like ours to join the EU, of course, comes also with a prerequisite to filing in for the green transition as one of the key priorities on the block. So in this regard, we know that we have the Sofia Declaration launched in 2020, where the green agenda for the Western Balkan was endorsed, mirroring the EU Green Deal objective and commitment of all the Western Balkan 6 countries, having a set of 58 actions as part of their action plan for the implementation of the green transition in 5 key areas. And having this policy level, here comes our effort as a researcher in this case, with the project of Green Force, where we did try to address gaps in current tracking and ensuring that the framework is both realistic and effective for guiding the green transition further in the Western Balkan. But let's stop a little bit at this policy overview of just green transition. Unfortunately, Western Balkan countries are, I must say, still fall behind the EU with regards to fighting or adapting to climate change, which comes because mainly of the lacking of a holistic approach to transformation, where all relevant policies are climate sensitive and are into place, which brings to a greater problem, which comes from lacking of general knowledge, equal to lacking of awareness of all stakeholders and actors involved in the process. And it equals also with a lack of studies on impact and assessing of the green transition costs and benefits in the end, which contributes to non-existent before ex ante assessment on the effects of this transition. And it's maybe in this lack of knowledge that I'd like to take just a few minutes to trying to unfold the theoretical concept of the notion just green transition. So when it comes to transition for the Western Balkan countries, we must say that the term transition in itself is an agony of never-ending transition. But theoretically, the transition or socio-technical transition implies this overall concept of multidimensional and multi-level system changes in time and in place at the same time. But for Western Balkans, I must say that this transition is purposive. So it's characterized by this deliberate goal pursued as an outset of transformation, which has an explicit set of societal expectations, and it's drawing heavily on the external resources, meaning the funds from the EU in order to pursue the green transition on the end. On the other hand, we have the green economy, so the green component being the sustainability transition in that sense, which comes with a number of spatial features. So sustainability and speciality, so in territory, in large scale, multiple transformation, sustainability when it comes to natural resources that we need to preserve, environmental sustainability, and the tensions between growth sectors such as the coal mine industries versus ethical implication on the resources. So in this regard, the sustainability should be understood as a norm that would promote equity and justice when it comes to the term of just green transition in the Western Balkans, but not only. The last concept, which I think is also one of the most important one, is the concept of justice, which has in its core the notion of no one being left behind in the process, but rather being part of it. So the justice theoretically comes from, or it's imposed during the International Labor Union movement already in the beginning of the 19th, and it's rooted in this process of industrial reconversion in the 70s and in the 80s. And when it comes to justice, we should understand that there are several layers to that. The first one being the distributional justice, trying to understand where impacts and resources are located and then redistributed in the territory. The procedural justice, so the formal and informal involvement and the degree of influence on how we pursue the policy level. And of course, the spatial justice, meaning that the territories, the spatial part should have an equal and justice distribution of the effects of just transition. I mean, if we want to really pursue this dream of having greener territories, we should really be looking into having equal distribution of the effects rather than having one territory benefiting from all the transition opportunities that comes with it. So when we all put it in, and I will recap it once again, when we all put it into perspective, just green transition is really a purposive transition for the Western Balkans in terms of policy level, because so far it has largely been treated as a buzzword merely. For example, if I try to translate into Albanian the just green transition and go to my mom or to my relatives and ask to them, what does it really mean for you? It's merely a buzzword that they have heard into the newspaper and among the politicians and so on, which comes to me as the conclusion of lacking this necessary depth of awareness regarding the scale and transformative changes it entails in the end of the day. So, and the idea behind that is that because the transition itself, or as a terminology for us in the Western Balkans, relates with the past and the ongoing transformation, especially the one employed after the post-communist era. And here I talk for Albania specifically on that regard. So as I said, this transition is purposive, so we have a purpose in itself. And while we are still transiting to this fully functional democratic system in the Western Balkans, we need to also have on board this new trajectory or transition to be integrated in the European Union in the future. So what did we do as we were lacking knowledge, as I said before, in terms of the Green Force project? We did engage into a research work, trying to assess the cost and benefits and impacts of green transition in 5 case studies. In Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia, each trying to tackle one of the pillars represented in the green agenda for the Western Balkans. So in Albania, we did try to research on the net zero transition for post-communist urban neighborhoods, while in Bosnia, we assessed the local and economic impact on this green transition, especially on the employment part. the waste management, implication into transition to the energy sector, especially the closing of the thermal power plant in North Macedonia, and sustainable mobility in Serbia. But why we did, and I'm not bothering you with the findings of our research, but I would share the information later on this common knowledge hub that will be provided by the project. But the idea of entering and trying to bring research into this case is actually trying to define new pathways toward reconceptualization of just green transition in the Western Balkan, which comes as a part of first trying to contextualize, so what's happening in the context with regards to the EU Green Deal, green agenda in the policy level, and what comes from the place-specific research approaches from the case study, and trying to bring those two things together. And of course, one of the very first components when trying to understand the conceptualization of just green transition in the Western Balkan is, of course, assessing the governance challenge. And the concept of governance here comes as a combination of encompassing the institution, processes, actors involved in shaping the policy and decision-making, and which are become fundamental then to understand the green transition. So in terms of multi-level governance, we started assessing the coordination among different levels of governments in each of the cases. We try to evaluate the degree to which different policies complement rather than contradict each other. We mapped all sets of laws and regulation governing policy implementation and assessing if there are compliance with environmental standards posed also by the EU. And in the end, which becomes very important actually, is mapping the participation of various stakeholders, including here not only the government, but also civil society organization, businesses being a very important part of the process, and the local communities in the end of the day. So just to illustrate really shortly, in the case of Albania, we did map the national level institution, and at the local level, the 61 municipalities which have the legal obligation to prepare and implement local plans for energy efficiency, renewable energy, and of course, the list of non-institutional, which are donors, NGO or bank sector, which are contributing to the process. In terms of policy coherence, we did map the national climate change strategy and a lot of laws and bylaws on that regard, coupled with the regulatory framework. And when it comes to the stakeholder engagement, we did map a total of 45 actors representing all the quadruple helix stakeholders. But what we saw is that the majority of these sectors really belong to the government category. And because those are the ones responsible for steering the process for just green transition, while the other part of it is other actors from the academia, NGOs, and so on and so forth. And in all the cases, what we did identify through the process is that, unfortunately, we still in the Western Balkans have weak institutional capacities, meaning that we need to increase the expertise, resources, and coordination mechanism to implement green policies effectively. We need to work better into managing the resources, as for the moment we do have insufficient resources in terms of funding and a shortage for skilled personnel hampered institution in order to perform better and to bring forward the project implementation and the monitoring and evaluation processes for the just green transition. We did find the fragmented policies and lack of coherence, mainly on the part of lacking of comprehensive national green transition strategies, and sometimes even conflicting policies, between different laws and bylaws. And one thing which was one of the most crucial is the limited public participation, where the general public usually lack the awareness and the understanding of the importance of the green transition. They do have limited access to information, which is double-sided, sometimes because the information is not there from the national institution, and in some cases because stakeholders do not know where to search and how to search, or they lack the general awareness to go and search for it. And the reason for that, or one of the reasons for that, is that we still do not have very much strong mechanism for citizen engagement, but we rather do processes formal, where the participation mechanisms are often under development. So,
okay, so time is running a bit.
Yes, I have only one slide left, so
okay.
Sorry for that. So this brings a majority of structural barriers that need to be brought forward. First of all, there is the stakeholder just transition perception and trust, where they think that the government model derivates from a place-based approach. There is, of course, skepticism about the opportunities that this transition would bring, or the faith in the government support structure that raise their concern, and also this prevailing perception without any clear accountability and transparent processes. So in terms of policy solution, I might say that we have three main pillars where to look into if we want really to bring the process forward. The policy and governments trying to develop inclusive and place-based transition plans with local stakeholders involved in the process, strengthening the governance structure and tailoring policies to regional socioeconomic traits, especially in the lagging region. In terms of social and economic support, we need to establish better target social safety nets and invest in the workforce and reskilling, entrepreneurship, and local economic diversification, and also promote transparent communication and community engagement. When it comes then to the technical and investment, of course, we need to further accelerate the renewable energy investments and to implement comprehensive decommissioning plans with environmental and social measure. So to close, and this is my last slide, the policy coherence for the just green transition does not necessarily imply this orderly transfer from the supra level of the national authorities in some cases to subnational authorities, but rather bring also the bottom up to meet in the midway in order to make things happen. And in the end of the day, well, transition without stakeholder participations are usually doomed to fail, or worse, even provoke major damage to local communities. And in this path towards different transition that we as Western Balkans have been walking to, we have seen that happen where participation is missing. So the cooperation remains key, and we really need to work towards that. So thank you. And sorry.
Yeah, don't worry. Timing is quite okay still. So thank you for this, Fiona. Now the next presenter, and as always, you can ask questions in the chat and in the question answer session. Some are not finding this feature, or maybe not everybody can maybe also answer these questions. So please just put in the chat, and also to the speakers, if you find a question addressing your presentation, you can already answer it in the chat. But now we're coming to Marta Schulte-Fischedick. The Energy Community Secretariat, works in Vienna at the Energy Community Secretariat, is also focusing on just energy transition goals across Western Balkans and other countries, and also promotes journalist and youth engagement in the energy community works, and has a scientific background and also in the national development sector, energy sector. So I will also ask you now to share your screen, Marta, and to start with your presentation. Yes, it's working.
Hello, everyone. It should pop up any minute. Yes,
yes,
so you see it.
I can see it. Perfect.
So hello, everyone. Quite challenging, the third presentation, but I try to keep it a bit dynamic. So I will talk today on gender disparities in the energy transition and also solutions in the Western Balkans. So the realities we see in numbers, and we also heard about them. So women remain underrepresented in the energy sector, also in decision-making roles. They face limited access to green jobs and training, they get paid less, and they face structural barriers to entering and, what's also important, remaining in the energy sector. So some deeper insights into these numbers, which maybe cannot be Googled out that easily, are, for example, that there is actually no statistical evidence that the renewable energy sector will automatically be different unless we have structural changes that we implement. So, for example, in Serbia, women make up around 16% of the renewable energy workforce. We see same numbers also in the EU. There was just a recent study actually from the EU showing also similar trends. They are still underrepresented in STEM courses in the Western Balkans, so the future leaders are not yet equally represented in the sector. And in the EU, there is also a poor retention rate for women in the energy sector in general, and also in the renewable energy sector. Then there's also often a disconnect between data and perception. We have a recent number showing from a UNDP study that businesses often don't see the barriers for women in STEM or green sector, so they think it's equal. And ultimately, that also means that decisions about our energy future, so the sector with the highest CO2 emissions in the Western Balkans, are predominantly made by men, who on average have lower perception on climate risk and prioritize also economic and technical solutions over lifestyle changes. So this is just like some reflections on these numbers, and it also highlights the urgent need for gender responsive programs, policies, and financing schemes. So I skip this one for now. So I would like to look into regions that will be highly impacted, and we have heard about them already. So coal regions are really in the focus of transition and decarbonization work in our regions. In some Western Balkan countries, coal jobs, so direct and indirect, make up actually 40% of local jobs. We heard some national numbers, but in communities, it can be super high, with the majority of jobs executed by men. So for example, in Plevia, coal region, men make up 93% of the workforce in the power plant. So women tend to experience this transition differently, often as indirectly affected, informal and also unpaid jobs, while also having less voice in the dialogue on energy transition and also less access to and ownership of resources. And women actually will be highly impacted by the transition. So for example, within processes of coal mine closure in the UK in the 80s, women were really at the forefront of protests. And a decade after closure, there's a study from Nottinghamshire, but also other regions, which showed that women faced higher unemployment, increased domestic violence, marriage breakdowns, and also due to the influx of workers seeking jobs, they were less likely to secure better paid jobs. And this example is just one out of many, but I think a powerful testament that women often actually know they will be highly impacted by the closure. So what's then the way forward? That's, of course, the big question. We have talked about that now already a little bit, but energy transition means moving from a current system to a new one. And of course, it's a never-ending process. But I think when planning and executing the transition, we should apply the set of principles that underline the concept of a just energy transition. So within our, and this is another reflection on now actually the definition of just energy transition, and we have heard about this, so I'm not repeating the one definition provided by ILO, but within our narrative and current just transition activities, the concept of work must be expanded to actually capture all jobs affected by the transition, to address women just as men. And for this, I would again like to travel to the origins of the language of just transition. So the concept originates in US trade unions, mainly men, in the 80s, advocating for workers' rights due to job losses from new environmental regulation. And although there is still no definition, our understanding of just transition and its core principle has expanded, as we just heard. However, the current transition plans and also policies, like, for example, early retirement, compensations or training programs, often really only benefit directly affected workers, so typically men, especially in those coal regions I was talking about. So I think women leadership for the transition represents a huge opportunity, and actually it's also crucial for it to be successful. We have, for example, two examples, Polish women, Wiesława Dziubak and Alisa Messerschmidt from trade unions, who made significant strides for labor rights and the inclusion of workers' voices in coal transition policies, also in the light of gender equality. For some people, Alicia is really the face on just transition in Poland. So including women in just transition policies is essential, as studies also show that their involvement enhances collaborative approaches and successful communication with the community. So it's an important asset actually to developing inclusive labor policies and acceptance for change. But of course, they also must become actually the key agents of the transition. Here we have, for example, Anna Jokic, a pioneer and co-founder of the first energy cooperative for solar in Serbia. And also with some other numbers in the EU, women-led companies and also companies with more women on boards tend to excel in energy efficiency investments and also renewable or other sustainability indicators. And similarly, also countries with a higher share of women are more likely to ratify environmental treaties and adopt climate change policies. So the big question, I think, here is really what can we do to structurally support women leadership and participation in this transition? And of course, this is a big question. And there is a tremendous number of interventions and also strategies. One way to structure this is to say, hey, we have the overall policy intervention on different levels. So for example, national, EU level, institutional. And also we have the stakeholder level. And from there, we have all opportunities to set up interventions. For example, we can target a specific group, or we want to use a specific format, or we target a specific challenge. And for example, looking now at the challenges for women to enter and stay, this is really also important in the energy sector, are super complex, but recent studies suggest that some major challenges or barriers are really inflexible work environments, which means we need to target the existing work policies, gender stereotypes, affordable childcare, and also locational and contextual sensitivity is required. A recent, I think, really interesting question by also a UNDP study is that they look at if women can actually commute as easy as men to the hotspots of new renewable energy where jobs will be required. Only one thing to look at this dimension. So underlying most of the measures is, of course, the legal framework. Legal commitments can have far-reaching implications and also often function as a roadmap. For example, the German government, with the feminist development policy in 2023, had implications, for example, on GIZ projects in the Western Balkans, and also led to gender action plans and gender responsive budgeting for projects. But also we as an institution with a gender equality declaration, this is a powerful instrument to actually say we want to do something. So what do we have? With regards to EU accession processes, countries committed, as we've heard, to the EU Green Deal, which aims to be gender sensitive or gender responsive, which is not the case in all or actually most packages, but it did trigger gender responsive budgeting and the integration of gender reporting into regulations such as the Just Transition Fund regulation, which is not yet accessible for the Western Balkans. Plus, there are also some current developments that look more promising. So, for example, the implementing regulation on NECP, so National Energy and Climate Plans, which is adopted and adapted for the contracting parties, so the Western Balkans, includes reporting structure to assess impact of policies and measures on gender. So what's the conclusion here? The conclusion is that strengthened gender inclusion and reporting requirements under the legal framework are needed, for example, within the governance regulation, Renewable Energy Directive, Energy Efficiency Directive, climate laws, and so on, but also gender responsive budgeting within national strategies, integrated into, for example, NECPs or just transition plans. And on a small scale, we also saw that internal commitments such as by GIZ or Energy Community or IFIs can have an immense impact. So the next slide is actually it's an aggregation of measures in the area of education, entrepreneurship, governance, and employment, with financing often being an underlying condition. I just want to talk about 3 examples. So for example, Albania is actually an international good practice example for gender responsive budgeting in public funds, with I think approximately 40% or 41% of budgetary programs being gender mainstreamed. And I find this also really cool. Since 2010, the School of Public Administration has included training on gender responsive budgeting into the regular curriculum. A second example is a mentoring program. So we are part of the EU Equality Platform, really inspiring platform, and they initiated first mentoring programs where institutions now set up diversity strategies at institutional levels. Third short example, updating school and university curricula to include green energy sector components, maybe with a social components, and try to also reach women there. A whole other here I would just like to highlight Poland as another best practice example with its just transition plans, where it's try to be more gender responsive within, for example, this workshop that engage women in transition activities, and also women energy networks that are actually super active in the Western Balkans. And we see and had discussions with them that they gain visibility, and also if they have more members, they gain more power, for example, in ministries, because they have connections to them also. And role models have also been shown to be very impactful, and they can also be very much highlighted through this women energy networks. So a whole nother story is, of course, the women entrepreneurship in the energy sector. There are many barriers for women entrepreneurs to access the energy sector. We had a whole webinar on this and also have a reflection PDF if you want to check that out. But what I maybe found very unexpected was that speakers repeatedly highlighted obstacles related to investors' trust, which seem to be very complex, but related to media presence, visibility, and age, for example. And here, of course, also women networks can help to increase the visibility and media presence. Some other good practice examples is, for example, Kosovo, where the government adopted measures to support registration of joint properties of both spouses, which had a positive effect of the economic standing and also access to finance for women, and adopted targets within entrepreneurship programs on the share of women that should be reached by this. A third short example, I find this also creative, is reduced ticket prices for women at targeted conferences. So last slide. At the moment, we are really missing youth, including young women. And at the same time, we see a high outmigration of young people. So it's really the question, how can we motivate youth to stay and support the transition in the countries, and also to make sure they know that what they do matters, and it actually matters what they do. For example, a report by Nature Climate Change showed that especially girls can influence parents, and especially male parents, about the reality of climate change if the parents have low level of climate concerns. And other successful examples here how to reach them is through simply reach women is to renaming technical studies to include more social components. There are also really cool numbers on that. And since some days, it's official also that we will actually launch a new Just Transition Young Voices Awards next week, where also women are especially encouraged to apply, and we try to bring this topic of just transition and community stories to young people and make them more motivated to research and report on them, and also give them a stage for their voice. So thank you so much for being patient with the third presentation, and I look forward to some questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, we're a bit behind schedule, but it's totally fine. I think it was very interesting presentations. We had some questions in the chat already, so you can also maybe feel free to answer it in the chat directly. The next plan was to have a discussion, a panel discussion, but we will have to shorten it a little bit because we have just 16 minutes left. So I would ask you now, all of three, that we've start with the first presenter again, to maybe like from your perspective, what is the most important key step that Western Balkan countries or the region as a whole should take to ensure gender responsiveness and workforce empowerment for just transition? So like, what is your main message? You can maybe just summarize in one sentence. If you read already questions in the chat and you think they regarding your presentation, you can also feel free to answer it. But now, just like already to summarize, like your main message, and we're starting with Anna Maria Misa. Sorry.
Sorry, I cannot answer in one sentence. I mean, there are a number of issues that individual countries of Western Balkans are facing, and especially for empowering of women, and those are different in different regions of individual countries, and then it's really difficult to generalize for one size fits all. However, I think that the cooperation is the key word, and that establishment of some kind of permanent cross-sectoral working group, which would involve ministries, chambers of commerce, vocational institutions, energy actors, trade unions, to discuss what is needed would be perfect. The trouble is who will be champion and who will drive the process. And if it's not the formal institution, then the formal institution is not very likely to participate. However, they are usually burdened with other effects, so some really support from the other actors would be needed. So I think that would be the very important step to identify the potentials and to harmonize different plans and to identify different interests.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So now, Viola, what would be your main message or the answer to the question I just asked?
Well, I mean, from the perspective of this green transition framework, the most important key steps that the Western Balkans should follow, and the region collectively in the Balkans and so on, is that we should take to institutionalize the gender and social equity as a core component of the transition strategies from the outset. This meaning that we need to go a little bit beyond this token measures and instead embed the gender responsive planning into every phase, from policy design to stakeholder engagement, budgeting, and so on and so forth. So yeah, in short, we cannot have a just green transition if we replicate the old models and we do make the same structural inequalities. So the framework itself must explicitly acknowledge and address how the burdens and benefit of transition are going to be distributed. Otherwise, we risk to widening the very disparities that we're seeking to overcome.
Yeah, Marta, will you just directly continue?
Yes, so I can just re-echo, I think, what was said, especially now, Fiona, because that's more the topic, institutionalize, sorry, gender responsive planning across all levels. I think that's the answer. For our case, it's also, I think, NECP, so national strategies to really be gender responsive, because that can then lead to also gender responsive project implementation and planning, or gender responsive budgeting. But of course, it's a key is the planning and really a clear structure for that. So.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. There were some questions directly answered in the chat, and I also copy pasted from the question answer tool some questions in the chat. Do you want to pick one of these questions? Is there any question you would like to answer? One of the panelists? Can you see the chat and the questions?
So I see. I can start with one of the last questions. About the Just Transition Fund for the Western Balkans. It's a big topic, and we are indeed also always, that's our narrative, that we need this Just Transition Fund. There was actually a Coal Regions in Transition initiative by the Commission. We were one principle of that. It ended, but it will continue, and we hope to see some more projects, and also then opportunities to have specific projects funded with this new initiative. Up to date, no, we don't have a similar fund for the Western Balkans. What we now have and will be published soon is actually a guidance on just transition plans. We are just working on it. It will be published the next days. Which is basically re-echoing the Just Transition Fund regulation and the reporting there. So it also includes, for example, gender components. But I highly agree that this financing support is needed. We are trying here also our best to get in touch with other IFIs and organizations to set something up. And this will be also topic of the Just Transition Forum this year. So sorry that I don't have other news on that.
Okay. Is there any other question one of you would like to answer?
So there was a question in a chat regarding the data sources and how the statistics measures green jobs. And this is, of course, a difficult question. In the study, we used three approaches. So we used employment factors from the EU. We used multipliers, and the basis were IRENA data and Eurostat data and international comparison. So by combining three different approaches, we came to roughly the same level of data. So there are some numbers, differences in numbers, but they are not so big. And if we are talking about how do we initiate from the national statistics, and there was also the question on bioenergy. So this is also quite difficult to tackle, especially if we are talking about the different value chains and what's input for what other sector and how is this reflected. So I would argue for harmonization of data and using the approach which is already used by Eurostat. And for renewables, the jobs are mainly estimated and based either on megawatts installed or megawatt hours produced, depending on different regions, or some rough estimates. So for the moment, as the numbers are low, we are probably making some big mistakes, but I think that this imperfect input is less challenging than all the other issues which were mentioned before. So if we knew all the other relevant information, that would be really a nice topic to deal with.
Fiona, you may want to answer one question, or is there one question?
No, just shortly to continue on the discussion that Anna Maria brought. Yeah, on the researcher's perspective, data scarcity is one of the crucial points that we deal with. And I must say that now the institution, especially the national ones that do the reporting for the EU in terms of policy commitments and the agreements that they make, they should also enter into data collection as well. Not only measuring or reporting in terms of the framework and the action level, but also entering into more substantial information of what's really happening in the territory. And on the other hand, of course, the local level institution being the municipalities where jobs are created, those are equally responsible for this kind of data gathering as well. It should be a collaborative approach in order to build good policies in the end of the day. So that would be my takeoff on how to initiate talking with this institution on the necessity of having data for data-driven decision-making policies in the end of the day.
Yeah. So thank you very much, panelists, for your inputs and questions. We have 5 minutes left. So on the agenda, I will share my screen first. So there is the last question in our Mentimeter poll. So we ask you also to give some feedback on the webinar today. What was your impression? And you can also use again what we have in the chat or the QR code, or you just maybe if the browser window is still open, you can just answer the questions. Overall, how would you rate today's webinar? So already some left, but this is like typical. In the last minutes of a webinar, people are leaving. It was also quite a long webinar. Sometimes it's just 60 minutes. Today it was 90 minutes. So please feel free to give us some feedback. And I would also right now, when some votes coming in, would give the floor to Ergi. He's also part of the project, and he will also give some closing remark and also some outlook. Please, Ergi.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, I'm Ergi, GIZ advisor. I coordinate the regional work of the Green Agenda project, focusing on energy transition and its impact on the labor market. I want to say thank you all for joining this webinar. We hope today's discussion was useful for your work on decarbonization efforts in the Western Balkans. Also, a big thank you to Anna Maria, Fiona, and Marta for joining us today and for sharing valuable insights from your work. From your respective institutions, Energy Community Secretariat, COPLAN, and IRMA. Indeed, as it was discussed, energy transition is a complex issue. It requires collaboration across sectors. That's why, as a project, we are trying to bring together energy, social, and education stakeholders. Only then we can work towards a just and systematic solution for a just energy transition. In this context and the work that was presented today from the side of GIZ, the labor market analysis for the Western Balkans provides a baseline context, and it shows what needs to be addressed in both the short and long term. Building on that work that we started several months ago with the support of our consultancy, we are working on a toolbox with short and long-term measures to address job gains and losses from the energy transition in the Western Balkan. Soon we will publish 2 policy briefs with policy solution models addressing Western Balkan governance for considering the needs of vulnerable groups and women in the workforce empowerment in energy sector. And soon a 3rd webinar will be announced coming next quarter, where we'll present all these results. Alongside that, GIZ is working with ERIZE. ERIZE is a regional education organization mandated for advancing that education system in the Western Balkan and Southeast Europe. And together, most probably in July, we will bring education stakeholders and energy experts to the table to develop an action plan, a regional roadmap. It will be focused on the role of that in energy transition, it will look at how to empower the workforce through skills development programs or current curricula being provided in the VET system in the Western Balkans and support their access into the new job opportunities created by the expansion of renewable energy projects. The full labor market study that Anna Maria presented today and all the webinar presentations will be available right after the webinar in the webinar page created by Energypedia. And particularly for the labor market study, there you will find country-specific insights and information on job projections, because what Anna Maria presented is actually a regional overview. If you have any question or ideas for collaboration to team up for joint efforts, feel free to contact GIZ team. And yeah, thank you again for being part of this important conversation.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you, Robert.
And right now, this little poll in Mentimeter is open where you can type in some suggestions, what you would like to have covered in the following webinar or other suggestions. So please feel free to give us some feedback. Otherwise, also from my side, thank you very much for your participation. And yeah, now it's exactly 3:30 on my watch here. So I will now close the webinar. And thank you very much for your participation. Okay.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you all.
Have a nice day.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Bye. Thank you.